There are moments in life when silence becomes deafening. For me, that moment came on a cold Tuesday in March in Calgary, when I opened the fridge and found only a tub of expired yogurt and half a bag of wilted carrots. The sound the door made when it closed echoed the emptiness that had settled into my life. My name is Sarah Mackenzie. I'm 34 years old, and up until 3 years ago, I believed I had found my place in the world. Married to David, mother to Emma, 8, and Liam, 6, I lived in a cozy home in the Kensington neighborhood. I worked part-time as an administrative assistant while David built his career as an engineer. It was a simple life, but a full one. Then David decided he needed to find himself, a phrase I've grown to hate with every fiber of my being. Apparently, finding himself meant an apartment downtown, a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, and a 23-year-old girlfriend named Brittany. The divorce was quick and brutal. He got the house, it was in his name, and I got the kids and a child support payment that barely covered the rent on the small apartment we moved into. "Mom, I'm hungry," Emma said that morning, pulling me back to the present. She stood in the kitchen in her school uniform, a worried expression on her face that no child her age should wear. "I know, sweetheart. I'll make something special for dinner tonight," I lied, trying to sound confident while mentally calculating how much money was left in my bank account. $17.43. That was all that separated my family from complete destitution. Liam came running out of the living room wearing nothing but underwear and a Spider-Man t-shirt. "Mom, there's no more cereal."
"Put your pants on, Liam. Now."
My voice came out harsher than I intended. He stopped running, his lower lip trembling slightly. The weight of guilt hit me like an avalanche. "I'm sorry, honey. Mommy's just tired." The truth was I was far beyond tired. I was exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. I worked 50 hours a week at 2 different jobs, one as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic during the day and another cleaning offices at night. Even so, the money never stretched far enough. Rent was $1,200, Liam's daycare was $800, not to mention food, clothes, medicine, and the 1,000 little expenses that constantly popped up. Worse than all of that were the looks. The silent judgment from other moms at school when I showed up in my cleaning uniform to pick up the kids. The whispered comments at the grocery store when I used coupons. The mix of pity and disapproval on people's faces when they found out I was divorced. "She should have tried harder to keep the marriage together," I once heard in a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Young women today give up too easily. If only they knew. If they knew about the nights I spent awake trying to save a marriage that had died years ago. If they knew how I begged David to try couples therapy, how I blamed myself when he said I had become boring and predictable. If they knew how many times I stared at myself in the mirror, wondering where I had gone wrong. After dropping the kids off at school, I drove my 2010 Honda Civic, which made a weird noise every time I hit the brakes, to the veterinary clinic. Dr. Harrison, the owner, was a kind man in his 60s who always treated me with respect, but even his kindness couldn't hide the cold reality of numbers. My salary simply wasn't enough. "Sarah, are you okay?" Dr. Harrison asked around 11 a.m. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I replied automatically, though I knew he could see right through the lie. The truth was, I'd skipped breakfast again. I had discovered that I could function on just 1 meal a day if necessary, saving all the food I had for Emma and Liam. During lunch, I sat in my car in the parking lot and checked my bank account on my phone. $17.43. My breathing quickened. Payday was Friday, and it was only Tuesday. How was I going to feed my kids for the next 3 days? That's when I saw her. She was standing next to a shiny silver Mercedes-Benz, clearly frustrated. She wore a camel wool coat that probably cost more than I earned in a month, and her gray hair was perfectly styled. She had that polished, confident look I used to have once upon a time. I watched as she tried to start her car over and over. The engine clicked, but wouldn't turn over. She stepped out and looked around for help, but the parking lot was nearly empty. For a moment, I hesitated. I barely knew the basics of car mechanics, and frankly, I had my own problems to deal with. But something about her expression, a mix of frustration and vulnerability, reminded me of how I'd felt so many times over the past few years. Alone. Helpless. Before I could talk myself out of it, I got out of my car and walked over. "Excuse me, do you need help?" She turned, and I saw the immediate relief in her blue-gray eyes. "Oh, thank you. My car just won't start. I don't know anything about cars." "Let's take a look." I popped the hood and, honestly, didn't know exactly what I was doing. But my dad always told me most car issues were caused by simple things. I checked the battery connections. One was loose. "I think I found the problem," I said, tightening the terminal. "Try it now." The engine roared to life instantly. "Oh my God, you're an angel." She clasped her hands together, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I have a really important meeting in 15 minutes. You literally saved my day." It was nothing, really. Just a loose terminal. She studied me for a moment, as if memorizing my face. "What's your name, dear?"
Sarah.
"Sarah Mackenzie." "Well, Sarah Mackenzie, I'm Margaret Beaumont. And you have no idea what you just did for me." She reached into her purse and pulled out some bills. "Please take this." "No, I can't." The words came out automatically, though my hand nearly shook with the urge to accept the money. It only took a few seconds of my time. "Then, at least let me buy you a coffee. There's a Tim Hortons just around the corner." I glanced at the clock. I still had 20 minutes left on my lunch break. "Okay." As we walked, Margaret talked about her meeting, something to do with a charitable foundation she ran. I half-listened, still processing the surreal experience of having a normal conversation with another adult. It had been weeks since I'd talked to anyone other than my kids, my bosses, or store clerks. At Tim Hortons, she insisted on buying not just coffee, but sandwiches too. "You're far too thin, dear. When was the last time you had a proper meal?" The question caught me off guard. I felt tears threatening to form. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Her voice was gentle but firm. I recognized the look. "I've been there." As we ate, Margaret told me her story. Widowed 10 years ago, no children, she now dedicated her life to helping women in transition. "My husband left behind more money than I could spend in several lifetimes," she said simply. "So, I decided to use it to make a difference." I didn't talk about my situation. I couldn't. Pride was still the only thing I had left, and admitting my complete hopelessness to a stranger felt like too much. But as we said goodbye, Margaret handed me her card. "If you ever need anything at all, call me." I went back to work with a full stomach for the first time in days, and a strange feeling of hope. Not that I'd ever call her. I wouldn't. But for a few moments I had felt seen. Valued. Human. That night, as Emma and Liam ate mac and cheese for the 5th time that week, I looked at Margaret's card on the kitchen table. Margaret Beaumont, Renewed Hope Foundation. Renewed hope. What an interesting concept. I had no idea that this simple act of kindness, tightening a battery terminal, was about to change everything. 3 days after my encounter with Margaret, my bank account showed minus $23.67. The paycheck had been delayed due to a payroll error at the clinic, and I was officially in the red for the first time in my life. I sat on my bed at 5 a.m., staring at the bank notification on my phone, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Emma and Liam were still asleep in the next room, unaware that their mother was having a silent panic attack. The options were limited, and all humiliating. I could call my mother in Halifax, but she lived off her pension and had already helped me more than she should have in the first few months after the divorce. I could call David, but our last conversation ended with him telling me I needed to learn to be more financially responsible, from the man who bought a $30,000 motorcycle while owing 3 months of child support. Or I could swallow my pride and call Margaret. "No way," I muttered to the empty room. But when Emma woke up an hour later complaining of a stomachache, and I noticed she was losing weight, my resolve began to crack. "Mom, can I take a sandwich for snack today?" she asked while getting dressed for school. I opened the kitchen cupboard. 2 slices of bread, a nearly empty jar of peanut butter. "Of course, honey." I made the thinnest sandwich in history, trying to stretch the ingredients. Liam walked into the kitchen, dragging his backpack across the floor. Mom, today's money day for the field trip. The teacher said it's $15. My heart stopped. I had completely forgotten about the zoo trip. Liam, sweetheart, Mommy will give you the money tomorrow, okay? I just forgot it at home today. But everyone else is going today. Am I going to be the only one who can't go? His eyes welled with tears, and it felt like someone was crushing my chest with an iron fist. No, sweetheart. You're going on the trip. I promise. After I dropped them off at school, with Emma asking me 3 times if I was okay and Liam still sniffling about the trip, I sat in the parking lot and stared at Margaret's card in the glove box. Margaret Beaumont, Renewed Hope Foundation. Damn it, I whispered, grabbing my phone. It rang twice before she answered. Margaret Beaumont. Hi, it's Sarah. Sarah Mackenzie. We met in the parking lot last Tuesday. Sarah, what a lovely surprise. How are you, dear? That simple question nearly undid me. I'm actually not doing great. You said if I ever needed anything. Where are you? I'll come get you. No, you don't have to. My son has a field trip today, and I don't have the money. What school? Hillhurst Elementary, but Margaret, I can't accept. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Sarah? Stop apologizing for needing help. She hung up before I could protest. 20 minutes later, a silver Mercedes pulled up next to my rattling Honda. Margaret stepped out in elegant jeans and a navy cashmere sweater, looking like she'd walked out of a magazine. Where's the school office? She asked, holding a designer purse that probably cost more than my car. Margaret, I can't let you do this. Do what? Give $15 so a kid can go on a field trip? She looked at me with an expression that was half amusement, half exasperation. Sarah, when was the last time someone was kind to you without expecting something in return? The question caught me off guard. I stayed silent, trying to come up with an answer. Exactly, she said, interpreting my silence correctly. Now take me to the office. At the school office, Margaret not only paid for Liam's trip, but also offered to cover the rest of the school year for both children. The secretary, Mrs. Patterson, who usually looked at me with a mix of pity and judgment, suddenly became all smiles and deference in Margaret's presence. Oh, how generous, Mrs. Beaumont. Sarah's children are such sweethearts. Liam is especially brilliant at math. I wanted to laugh at the hypocrisy. Just last week, the same Mrs. Patterson had scolded me about being late with the extracurricular fee. After leaving the school, Margaret took me to a nearby cafe, not Tim Hortons this time, but a small, cozy place called Analog Coffee. The kind of place where people worked on MacBooks and ordered oat milk lattes. Now, she said after we ordered, tell me what's really going on. And so, for the first time in months, I talked. I told her about David and the divorce, about the 2 jobs that still weren't enough, about sleeping 3 hours a night and eating 1 meal a day, about the judgmental stares and whispered comments, about feeling like I was failing at everything. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished, I felt drained and exposed, like I had stripped naked in public. You know what strikes me most about your story? She said finally. How pathetic I am. No, her voice was firm. How strong you are. Sarah, you're raising 2 kids on your own, working 2 jobs, and still stopped to help a stranger in a parking lot while your own life was falling apart. That's not failure. That's heroism. I felt tears burning in my eyes. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a fraud. Because society told you that if you can't do it all alone, you've failed. Especially as a woman. Especially as a mother. Margaret leaned in. But that's a lie, Sarah. A cruel lie that keeps us isolated and ashamed. Then she told me her own story. How she had been married to an abusive man for 15 years before she found the courage to leave. How she lost contact with her own parents because they believed she should stick it out and make the marriage work. How she rebuilt her life at 45, alone and terrified. My husband Richard, the second one, the good one, used to say that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time you do. She smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. You've been getting back up every day for 3 years, Sarah. That's real strength. When we parted an hour later, Margaret gave me more than just kind words. She handed me an envelope. "Don't open it now," she said as I started to protest. "Open it when you get home." And Sarah? This isn't charity. It's an investment. An investment in what? In you. That night, after Emma and Liam went to sleep, Liam still excitedly talking about the lions and giraffes he saw at the zoo, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $2,000 and a handwritten note. "Sarah, this is not a gift. It's a no-interest loan you can repay whenever and however you're able. But more importantly, it's a reminder that you are worth helping. There's also something I'd like to discuss with you. My foundation is looking for someone to coordinate our family support programs. The salary is $55,000 a year with full benefits. If you're interested, call me. With love, Margaret. P.S. Sometimes the universe puts us in the right place at the right time. Maybe you helped fix my car, but I think we both received a blessing that day." David chose the Starbucks at Chinook Center for our conversation. Of course he did. A public place where I couldn't make a scene, as he always used to say. As if expressing pain or frustration were something shameful, something that should be hidden. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. A small rebellion that gave me surprising satisfaction. David was sitting at a corner table, fiddling with his iPhone, wearing a navy blue polo shirt I had bought for him 2 birthdays ago. The irony did not go unnoticed. "Sarah." He stood up, hesitant, unsure whether to hug me. He settled for an awkward nod. "You look different." It was true. Something had changed since my conversation with Margaret. Maybe it was the fact that I had eaten 3 full meals a day that week. Maybe it was knowing I finally had options. Or maybe it was simply that I had stopped apologizing for existing. "David." I sat down without ordering coffee. I wasn't staying long. "So, what did you want to talk about?" He drummed his fingers on the table, a nervous habit that used to irritate me. Now it just made me feel sorry for him. "About the money you owe." His face shut down immediately. "Sarah, we've been over this. I have expenses too. The apartment isn't cheap, and Brittany is studying too." "Stop." The word came out stronger than I expected. David froze, surprised. In 12 years together, I had never interrupted him. "You owe $2,847 in child support. Your daughters have been eating macaroni and cheese 5 times a week. My daughters are being well taken care of. By me. Alone. While you play the rebel youth with your girlfriend." I felt an old anger rise, and this time, I didn't push it down. I let it burn. "Emma has lost 4 pounds in the last month, David. 4 pounds. Because I've been splitting my meals with them." For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. "I didn't know things were that hard." "Of course you didn't. When's the last time you asked how they were doing? When's the last time you asked how I was doing?" "Sarah, you're being dramatic." "No," I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I'm being honest. Something you never were with me." Silence stretched between us. David looked at his phone, clearly uneasy with this version of me, the one who didn't accept his excuses by default. "Look," he finally said, "I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I nearly laughed. "David, you abandoned your family. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." "I didn't abandon anyone. I pay child support. When you remember. And always 3 months late." I pulled out my phone and showed him the calculator. "Want to know how much you've paid in the last 6 months? $1,200. Know how much you were supposed to pay? $4,800. He glanced at the numbers, then looked away. "Things have been tight. For you? With your engineer's salary and 0 real responsibilities." I felt something break inside me, not from sadness, but relief. Like I was finally removing a weight I had carried for years. "You know what, David? For years, I blamed myself for our marriage falling apart. I thought if I had been more interesting, thinner, something, you would have stayed. Sarah, but I was wrong." My voice was steady now, clear. "The problem wasn't me. The problem is you. a selfish man who never grew up. You want all the freedom of being single with none of the responsibility of being a father. His face turned red. That's not fair. Fair. The word came out like a bitter laugh. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that an 8-year-old asks me if we'll make rent this month? Is it fair that I work 50 hours a week and still can't afford medicine when Liam gets sick? I didn't know. Because you didn't want to know. I slapped my hand on the table, making a few people turn their heads. I didn't care. You wanted the fantasy of having kids without the reality of raising them. David looked around, clearly embarrassed by the attention. Sarah, keep your voice down. No, that one word seemed to echo between us. I'm not lowering my voice. I'm not making this easy for you. I'm not protecting your comfort at the expense of my dignity. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I could still see the man I once loved, young, charming, full of dreams. But I could also see what he had become, someone who chose ease over responsibility, fantasy over reality. What do you want from me, Sarah? He finally asked, his voice tired. Nothing. The simplicity of the answer surprised both of us. Literally nothing. I don't want your apologies because they're not sincere. I don't want your promises because you never keep them. I don't even want your money. But you just said. I said what you owe. But I realize now that expecting you to be a responsible father is like expecting snow to fall upward. I stood up, grabbing my purse. Your daughters will grow up knowing that you chose not to be present. That's a consequence you'll have to live with, not me. Sarah, wait. He stood too, looking genuinely alarmed. You can't just. I can. And I am. I looked at him one last time. You know, for years I thought you had broken me, that I'd never be strong enough to rebuild my life. But today I realized something. You never had the power to break me. I just thought you did. I walked out of Starbucks with my head high, ignoring his voice calling after me. In the parking lot, I sat in my Honda and took a deep breath. My heart was racing, but not from anxiety. From pure adrenaline. From release. I picked up the phone and dialed Margaret. Sarah, how are you, dear? I'm free. I laughed, surprised by how true that word felt. Margaret, about the job offer. You're accepting?
Yes.
But I have one condition. What is it? I want to help create a program specifically for single mothers. Something that goes beyond money. Emotional support, financial literacy, maybe even legal aid. The words rushed out, like they'd been waiting for years. There are so many women out there who feel like I did. Invisible, ashamed, hopeless. Sarah, Margaret said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I think you just found her calling. 2 weeks later, I was in my new office at the Renewed Hope Foundation, looking out the window at downtown Calgary. Emma and Liam had adjusted well to the changes, especially after I explained we could now afford real food, and yes, they could finally join extracurriculars like the other kids. Mom, Emma asked me the first night in our new home, a small but sunny duplex in Hillhurst. You look different. Different how? Taller, she said thoughtfully, tilting her head. Like you grew. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had grown. Or maybe I had simply stopped shrinking. David called twice after our conversation. I didn't answer. He texted things like starting over and being a family again. I deleted them without replying. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be burned so you can move forward. But not everything was resolved. There were still nights when loneliness rolled in like a cold wave. Still moments when I doubted my decisions. Still the challenge of learning to trust again, in myself, and eventually, maybe, in someone else. But for the first time in years, those fears didn't paralyze me. They were just part of the journey. And I had discovered something important in that conversation with David. My voice hadn't disappeared all these years. I had just chosen not to use it. Now it was back. And it had a lot to say. 6 months after I started at the Renewed Hope Foundation, I was sitting in a boardroom on the 15th floor of a downtown Calgary building, presenting our new program, Women Rebuilding, to a panel of potential donors. 6 months ago, the idea of public speaking would have sent me into a panic. Today, I felt a vibrant energy running through my veins. What we've discovered, I said, clicking to the next slide in the presentation, is that poverty among single mothers isn't just a financial issue. It's systemic. It's emotional. It's about self-esteem crushed by years of social messaging telling you that you're not enough. I looked at the faces around the table, business people, philanthropists, people who'd never worried about making rent. But I also saw Margaret, sitting in the corner with a proud smile on her face. Our program offers much more than financial assistance, I continued. We provide financial education, free legal counseling, support groups, and most importantly, we offer a mirror where these women can see themselves for who they truly are, strong, capable, worthy. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then applause. Not just polite, but genuine. Questions? I asked. A man in an expensive suit raised his hand. Ms. Mackenzie, your numbers are impressive. You've helped 127 families in 6 months. But how do you ensure that's sustainable? It was a question I had expected. Because we're not just giving fish, Mr. Davidson. We're teaching how to fish. Of the 127 families we've supported, 89 now have independent financial stability. 23 have started their own businesses. And 15 have gone back to school to complete degrees or certifications. And the costs. For every dollar invested in the program, we see a return of $4 in the local economy. These women don't stash money under mattresses. They spend it in their communities. They pay taxes. They create jobs. I smiled. It's philanthropy that's also good business. After the meeting, Margaret and I celebrated at Charcut, a fancy restaurant I couldn't have imagined stepping into a year ago. You were brilliant, she said, raising her wine glass. Absolutely brilliant. I still can't believe we secured the $500,000, I said, feeling a mix of euphoria and disbelief. That means we can expand to Edmonton and Winnipeg. It means much more than that. Margaret leaned forward. It means you've found your calling, Sarah. You're not just helping women. You're changing how society sees them. It was true. Over the past few months, I'd been interviewed on CBC Radio and featured in the Calgary Herald. I'd spoken at conferences on women's poverty. City officials had begun consulting me on social policy. Somehow, I had become an expert. But the most rewarding part wasn't the public recognition. It was seeing the transformation in the women we served. Like Jessica, 28, who came into our program 3 months ago wearing donated clothes and apologizing for breathing. She had left an abusive relationship with 2 small kids and no professional skills. Today, she was graduating from an accounting course and had landed an internship at a local firm. Sarah, she told me last week, you taught me I don't have to apologize for existing. Or Maria, an immigrant from El Salvador raising 3 kids alone after her husband was deported. When I met her, she was cleaning offices for $12 an hour and sending half of it to her family abroad. Now, with help from our legal partners, she'd secured a work permit and started a small catering business that was rapidly growing. The difference, Maria told me in her still improving but determined English, is that you saw me as a person, not a problem. The program had become more than I dreamed. We had partnerships with SAIT for vocational training, with law firms for pro bono legal advice, and with the provincial government for navigating benefit systems. But maybe the most important part was our weekly support groups. Every Thursday night, our conference room turned into a circle of chairs where 15 to 20 women gathered to share their stories. It wasn't formal therapy, it was something more powerful. It was sisterhood. You know, Carmen said one evening, before coming here, I thought I was the only woman in the world who felt like a total failure. Carmen was a registered nurse who had lost her job after taking leave to care for her mother with dementia. At 45, she found herself unemployed, in debt, and caring for both her mother and teenage son. Now I realize, she continued, that we're not failures. We're survivors. Amen, said Priya, a Sikh woman who had left an abusive arranged marriage. And survivors lift each other up. It was in those moments I remembered why this work mattered so much. These women didn't need charity, they needed community. They needed to know they weren't alone. After that Thursday's meeting, I stayed back to tidy the room. I was stacking chairs when I heard a knock at the door. Sarah? I turned and saw a man standing in the doorway. Tall, dark hair peppered with gray, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Something about him looked familiar. Can I help you? The office is closed. Actually, I was waiting for you. I'm Tom Chin. He extended a hand. My sister Emily attends your group. Emily Chun. A 32-year-old nurse going through a divorce from a gambling-addicted husband who had lost the family's house. Emily is wonderful, I said, shaking his hand. But if you're worried about confidentiality? No. He shook his head quickly. Actually, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you. Emily is different. Since she started coming here. Stronger. More herself. He paused, searching for the right words. For years, she blamed herself for Jason's addiction. Thought if she were a better wife, he'd stop. Now she understands she can't fix someone else. A familiar wave of satisfaction washed over me. That was it. That was exactly what we hoped to achieve. Emily did the work, I said. We just offered the space. Still. Tom hesitated. I was wondering if you'd like to have coffee sometime. To talk more about the program. I'm a journalist at the Herald, and I think this story needs to be told on a bigger scale. For a moment, I was speechless. It had been so long since a man had invited me to anything that I almost didn't recognize the gesture for what it was. I began, then paused. The old voice in my head, the one trained by years of marriage to David, told me to be cautious, not to trust, to guard the heart that had once been shattered. But there was a new voice now, too. The one that had stood up to David at Starbucks. The one that had spoken to donors today. The one that reminded me daily that I was stronger than I thought. Coffee would be great, I heard myself say. But fair warning, this conversation's going to get really interesting when you find out I have 2 kids, a terrible ex-husband, and that just a year ago, I was surviving on 1 meal a day. Tom laughed. A genuine, warm laugh. Sarah, my last girlfriend had 3 cats she treated like human children and an obsession with true crime documentaries. 2 real kids sound downright normal. For the first time in years, I laughed, truly laughed. Not the polite laugh I used in professional settings, but the kind of laugh that bubbled up from deep inside. All right then, I said. Coffee. But you're warned. If this turns into an article, I want editorial control. Negotiable, he said, smiling. How about Saturday morning? I know a place that makes the best scones in Calgary. After he left, I stood alone in the quiet office, processing what had just happened. For years, I had defined myself solely as a mother and an ex-wife. Now, suddenly, I was more. I was a program director, an advocate, a speaker, a leader, and maybe, just maybe, I was ready to be simply Sarah again, too. Outside, snow was beginning to fall softly on the streets of Calgary. But for the first time, winter didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something new, forming beneath the surface, waiting for spring to bloom. The seeds were planted. Now it was time to let them grow. The coffee with Tom happened on a sunny March morning at Monogram Coffee, a cozy spot in Calgary's Kensington neighborhood that served the best scones in the city, just as he had promised. We arrived at the same time, both slightly nervous in ways we tried to hide. You look different without the professional blazer, he said, smiling as he held the door open for me. It was true. I had chosen jeans and a green sweater Emma insisted, made my eyes shine. I felt more like myself, but also vulnerable in a way I hadn't felt in years. Different good or different bad? I asked, taking a seat by the window. Definitely good. You look relaxed. We talked for 3 hours. Tom was easygoing in a way David never was. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. He told me about his own journey, a divorce 5 years ago, no children, a journalism career that had taken him from Toronto to Calgary in search of stories that mattered. What brought me west was a series on climate change, he said, sipping his second coffee. But what made me stay were the people. Calgary has this unique energy, like you can reinvent yourself here. It's true, I agreed. Sometimes I feel like Calgary saved me as much as Margaret did. Tell me about her. Margaret. So I told him the whole story, the parking lot meeting, how she saw something in me I couldn't see in myself, how one small act of kindness turned into a life-changing friendship. That's fascinating, Tom said, but not in the calculated way of a reporter. How kindness multiplies exponentially. You helped Margaret with her car, she helped you with a new perspective on life, and now you're helping hundreds of other women. It's not just about me, I protested. These women are. Sarah. He leaned forward. You can take credit for the good you've done. It doesn't diminish their strength, it amplifies it. It was the kind of thing Tom said often, and it caught me off guard every time. He saw things in me that I was still learning to see myself. We left the cafe with plans for dinner on Friday. Not a professional interview, a real date. For the first time in 4 years, I felt that familiar mix of excitement and terror that comes with new possibilities. That feeling lasted exactly 4 days. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called me with a voice I hadn't heard since the day we met, tense, worried. Sarah, you need to come to the office.
Now.
When I arrived, I found Margaret in the conference room with 2 men in suits I didn't recognize. One was older, with graying hair and a serious expression. The other was younger, holding a folder of documents. Sarah, this is James Morrison and Kevin Campbell from the Municipal Audit Office. My stomach dropped. Audit. We received an anonymous tip, Morrison said flatly. Allegations of financial mismanagement and nepotism within the Women Rebuilding Program. We're here to investigate. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Mismanagement? Nepotism?
What are you talking about?
Campbell opened his folder. The report alleges that you're favoring certain participants, using foundation funds for personal gain, and that there are irregularities in your selection criteria. That's ridiculous. I felt anger rising, but also fear. All our records are transparent. Every dollar is accounted for. We have independent oversight. That will be determined through the investigation, Morrison said. Until then, the program is suspended. Suspended? Margaret stood up. Gentlemen, this is extremely premature. The Renewed Hope Foundation has an impeccable reputation. We understand, Mrs. Beaumont. But when allegations involve municipal funds, we have to proceed with caution. After they left, Margaret and I sat in stunned silence. Who would do this? I finally asked. Who would even have reason to? I stopped. I knew only one person malicious and petty enough to try to destroy something good out of spite. David. Margaret looked at me. Your ex-husband? But how would he know details about the program? Because he's been digging. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. Liam mentioned a few weeks ago that his dad had been asking a lot of questions about my work. I thought it was just late curiosity. I grabbed my phone and dialed David. He answered on the second ring. Sarah? What a surprise. How are you? Cut the crap, David. It was you. I did what? The anonymous complaint about the program.
It was you.
There was a pause. Then a laugh that made my stomach churn. Prove it.
Why?
My voice trembled with rage. Why would you do this? This program helps families. Helps children. Because you need to learn that actions have consequences, Sarah. You humiliated me at that Starbucks. Made me look like an idiot in front of my girlfriend when she asked about that conversation. So, you decide to destroy something that helps innocent people? I decided to show you that you're not as special as you think. That all this reinvention is just a facade. Deep down, you're still the same pathetic woman who couldn't keep her husband interested. The words hit me like physical blows. For a moment, I felt the old version of myself, small, ashamed, willing to accept blame that wasn't mine. Then I remembered the women in the Thursday groups. Jessica learning she didn't need to apologize for existing. Maria building a business from scratch. Carmen discovering that surviving wasn't failure. You're right about one thing, David, I said, my voice growing steadier. I'm not the same woman. The old me would have accepted this. Would have found a way to make it her fault. But the woman I am now, she'll fight. Good luck with that. I don't need luck. I have something better. I have the truth. I hung up and looked at Margaret. We're going to need legal help. good legal help. I already called our lawyers, she said. Sarah, even if we prove the claims are false, it could take months. The reputational damage. The women. I cut in. What happens to the women in the program? Margaret sighed. They'll have to find support elsewhere. Temporarily. I thought of Carmen, who had just found a new job. Of Priya, fighting for custody of her children. Of all the women who relied not just on financial aid, but the community we'd built. No, I said. I'm not going to let that happen. Sarah, we don't have a choice. There's always a choice. I stood, a familiar fire burning in my chest. If we can't use foundation funds, we'll find another way. Churches, community centers, crowdfunding. These women will not pay the price for the spite of a man who can't accept that his ex-wife is stronger without him. Margaret smiled for the first time in an hour. You know this is going to be a war, right? Good. I grabbed my bag. Because war is something I know how to fight now. That night, I called Tom to cancel our date. I completely understand, he said. But Sarah? If you need someone to listen, or just to bring Chinese food at 2 a.m. while you work on solutions, call me. Tom, you barely know me. You don't have to get involved. Sarah. His voice was kind but firm. Good people fight for important causes. Better people fight beside other good people. Let me be a better person. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, starting a list of what we'd need to keep the program running independently. Emma walked in wearing her pajamas, dragging her feet into the kitchen for a glass of water. Mom, are you okay? You look mad. I looked at my 8-year-old daughter, who had grown up watching her mother bend under pressure, settle for less than she deserved, let others define her worth. I'm not mad, sweetheart, I said, pulling her into a hug. I'm determined, and there's a big difference. What's the difference? Anger makes you want to break things. Determination makes you want to build better ones. Emma nodded solemnly, like it made perfect sense. After she went back to bed, I looked out the kitchen window at the melting snow on Calgary's streets. Spring was coming, and with it, the promise of new growth. David thought he could break me again. Thought he could destroy something beautiful out of spite. He was about to find out that the roots I'd grown over the past 2 years were much deeper than he ever imagined. The first emergency meeting happened in my living room on a Friday night. 17 women squeezed into my small duplex, some sitting on the floor, others leaning against the walls. Jessica brought coffee in thermoses. Maria showed up with a tray of homemade empanadas. Carmen had organized a collective babysitting system, so everyone could attend. So, said Priya, always direct, some asshole is trying to screw with our program. What are we going to do about it? It was exactly the right question asked in exactly the right way. There was no victimhood in her voice, no desperation. Just pure determination. First, we're going to prove the allegations are false, I said. I have all the financial records, all the approvals, all the selection criteria. Everything is documented. And second, Jessica asked. Second, we're not going to wait for the system to save us. We're going to save ourselves. Carmen leaned forward. What do you have in mind? I spread out a map of Calgary on the coffee table. There are 17 women here. Each of us knows at least 5 others who could benefit from support. We have collective skills in accounting, nursing, food service, cleaning, childcare, education. Why not build our own network? A cooperative, said Maria, her eyes lighting up. Like the ones we have in El Salvador. Exactly. We don't need the city's permission for women to help each other. We don't need bureaucracy to share resources. But what about the money? Someone asked. The program offered grants, loans. We might not have the same money, said Jessica, but we have something better. We have real community. Over the next 3 hours, we built a plan. Carmen would use her contacts in the healthcare system to connect women with medical resources. Jessica, now working at an accounting firm, would offer free financial consulting. Maria would expand her catering to provide subsidized meals for moms working double shifts. And I, said Priya, will use my experience with abusive divorce to help other women navigate the legal system. You all realize, I said, looking around the room, that you're creating exactly what we dreamed of with the original program? Woman-to-woman support. Collective strength. The difference, said Carmen, is now it's ours. No one can take this away from us. By the end of the night, we had not only a plan but a name. Sisters of Calgary. And a first event, a fundraiser at the Hillhurst Community Center the following Saturday. Sarah, Jessica said after the others had left, you realize what you've done here, right? We did.
No. You.
You showed us we were strong. Now we're showing you. On Monday, Tom showed up at my office, which I was still using while the investigation unfolded, with a folder of documents and a satisfied grin. You're going to love this, he said, spreading papers across my desk. What is it? Phone records. Your ex-husband made a classic mistake. Tom pointed to a highlighted line. He called the city's tip line from his personal cell phone. Then, apparently paranoid that he wouldn't be taken seriously, called again the next day pretending to be someone else. Same number. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Does that prove he made the false report? That, and the fact that the specific allegations in the complaint include details only someone with access to your personal records would know. Details not available in public documents. Tom leaned back in his chair. Your lawyer has already filed a lawsuit for defamation and harassment. And I wrote an article that goes out in tomorrow's Herald, exposing the entire situation. Tom, I began, but he raised a hand. Before you protest about journalistic ethics, this is genuinely news. Attempts to dismantle social programs through false accusations is something the public needs to know, especially when there's a pattern of men using the legal system to continue abusing their ex-wives. By Wednesday, the municipal investigation was officially closed. Morrison called me personally to apologize. Unfortunately, this sort of thing is becoming more common, he said. People using our oversight systems as personal weapons. We'll be implementing changes to prevent it in the future. And the Women Rebuilding Program? It's officially reinstated, with increased funding. The city wants to show its support for programs that actually work. But when Margaret and I met to discuss the reinstatement, we had an interesting conversation. Sarah, what you and the other women created over the last few weeks, it's extraordinary, she said. Sisters of Calgary is serving more families than the official program ever did. It was true. In 3 weeks, our informal network had grown to over 200 women across Calgary. We had support groups in 4 neighborhoods, a cooperative childcare program, and even a small community-run loan fund. What are you suggesting? That maybe it's time to think bigger. What would you say to expanding the Sisters of Calgary model to other cities? With official funding, but community leadership. The idea took my breath away. You're talking about a complete shift in how social support works. I'm talking about giving women the power to help each other instead of making them dependent on institutions. I'm talking about scaling systemic change. 3 months later, I stood on stage at the TELUS Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 500 social workers, politicians, activists, and most importantly, women who had transformed their own lives. When I met Margaret Beaumont in a parking lot 2 years ago, I was broken. Not just financially, but spiritually. I had accepted the narrative that my worth was measured by my ability to keep other people happy, even at the cost of my own dignity. I spotted Margaret in the front row, smiling proudly. What I've learned since then is that real strength doesn't come from never falling down. It comes from always getting back up, and more importantly, from helping others get back up too. The applause was thunderous, but what moved me most were the faces in the crowd. Jessica, now a supervisor at her accounting firm. Maria, whose catering had become one of the most sought after in the city. Carmen, who had gone back to school to become a mental health counselor. And, at the back, leaning against the wall, Tom, who had become so much more than a friend, who had taught me that real love isn't about rescuing or being rescued, it's about 2 strong people choosing to build something together. After the talk, there was a reception. David showed up. I hadn't expected him, but I wasn't surprised. He had lost the defamation lawsuit, had been forced to pay damages, and, according to what I'd heard, Brittany had left him when the story broke. Sarah. I turned to face him. 2 years ago, his presence would have made me anxious, insecure. Now, he just looked small. David. You look good. There was something desperate in his voice. I was thinking maybe we could talk. About starting over. About being a family again. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. Sorry for the man who had chosen repeatedly to destroy rather than build, who had confused power with strength, who still didn't understand that you can't love someone back into loving you. David, I said gently, I truly wish you the best. I do. But my family is already complete. I looked across the room at Tom, who was talking with Emma and Liam, who had insisted on coming to support Mom in her important thing. I looked at Margaret, surrounded by a group of women policymakers. I looked at all the women who had become sisters, mentors, friends. This is my family now, I said. And it's perfect just the way it is. David nodded slowly, as if he finally understood he had lost something he would never get back. After he left, Tom appeared by my side. You okay? More than okay. I took his hand. I'm free,